All right, let's jump into this first story from The Hill. Ukraine capital preparing evacuation centers for possible nuclear strike. They're also handing out potassium iodide. Poland's been doing the same thing. And the other big news here is that Poland suggests hosting U.S. nuclear weapons amid growing fears of Putin's threats. So, look, all of this. You know, when I see Ukraine and they're giving out potassium iodide, these are the tablets you take to try and protect your thyroid when there's radioactive particles everywhere, and they're prepping evacuation centers. I don't trust Ukraine. Look, I don't like that Russia invaded them. I don't like that Russia is annexing these regions. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't like what they do with Crimea. But I think Ukraine is desperate. So they're going to say whatever they need to say to make it seem like the end is nigh and we need to keep giving them money. And they just announced, another like $600 million, 625 or some ridiculous number. So when Ukraine's like, oh, you prepare for a nuclear strike, are they doing that to freak us out to get the headline? Or are they actually concerned it's going to happen? That being said, when Poland suggests hosting U.S. nuclear weapons, which is basically spitting in the face of Putin, who said, do not move nukes into Eastern Europe, maybe it's not so much that they're watching in Ukraine. They're watching Putin do something, although that train carrying like the nuclear MOD group, whatever it was called, they are seeing that. But maybe the reason Ukraine is prepping for a nuclear strike is because they know what NATO is doing. And they know what NATO is doing will result in a response from Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. If you're not worried, you're not paying attention to what's going on here. There's been severe escalations on both sides. This is heading down a trajectory of just further dangerous pathways that, of course, don't have any diplomacies, don't have any detente, don't have any compromises. The only reason why the world wasn't blown up during the Cold War is because people negotiated. People came to the negotiation table and said, okay, let's figure this out. Let's make sure we compromise on a deal that benefits both of us so we could both get away from killing each other and extinguishing and destroying the entire world. We're not having any of that. The president of Ukraine literally just signed into law a decree that prevents him from even negotiating with Vladimir Putin and having a peace deal with him. That to me is absolutely absurd, and it is crazy.
Yeah, they framed Kennedy as having just strongman, who was the Russian premier at the time. It was Khrushchev, to take the nukes out of Cuba, and Khrushchev did it. But that's not what happened. Kennedy used diplomacy, and he worked with Khrushchev and said, we'll take our nukes out of Turkey if you take your nukes out of Cuba. It was a diplomatic action. And without diplomacy, we're not going to see the nukes. We're not going to see de-escalation. This is Will Chamberlain brought this up.
Well, you're really specifically talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, where not many people know this, and people didn't know this when it was happening. But as you mentioned, JFK compromised with Khrushchev, and JFK agreed to get rid of the missiles that were located in Italy and in Turkey that Russia thought was going to be used against them. And therefore, the Russians were then only willing to compromise and get rid of their missiles from Cuba, which of course threatened the United States. So that was a compromise.
But hold on. How could JFK have done that? Surely the information on where those nukes were classified, and he wouldn't have the authority to declassify any of information like that, right? Some greater authority than the president. I mean, that right? Am I wrong?
I guess it turns out the president can declassify whatever he wants.
I guess the 1960s were different than 2022.
Well, the whole thing with Trump and the classified documents just shows maybe the country has been subjugated. If the president is now being attacked because he had classified documents when previously we had a president who revealed the location of our nuclear weapons directly to our principal adversary, and that was a good thing. Now Trump can't even have documents that were empty folders, apparently. It just goes to show that the presidency is subjugated by something.
Yeah. Well, you were saying earlier, Jason, that you think there's some sort of authoritarian aspect here. I just got a tweet from disclosed.tv that the U.S. is to buy, quote, nuclear emergency drugs for $290 million from a pharmaceutical company. What is it called? Amgen is the name of the company. It's called Nplate, is the Health and Human Services drug. 125 micrograms is around $1,200. So don't discount the pharmaceutical company's attempt to profit off of a nuclear scare.
Oh, man. Look, potassium iodide is just like, it's cheap. It's nothing. It's potassium. It's iodine. You can get iodine from your table salt. You get that, you got what is it, like iodine salt or whatever, the little Morton girl with the umbrella or whatever. That works too. The point of these pills is that it satiates your thyroid. It gives you all the iodine you need so you don't absorb the particles. But I'm saying I would not be surprised if these companies come up with some way to make something slightly different. You know what they add? They'll add a little aspirin to it and be like, it'll protect you from radiation and cure a headache, and it costs $1,000.
That's exactly what they're doing. This is from healthandhumanservices.gov. HHS purchases drug for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies, and they're going right to a private pharmaceutical company.
Does it say what the drug is?
Yeah, I think I just mentioned it as an N-plate, NPLATE.
I'd have to look into what that does.
Sure, it's a subcutaneous powder for injection, according to Disclosed TV. But then they link us over to Health and Human Services where they're getting the information.
Well, I don't know, man. But do you guys even think it's going to get to that point? I kind of feel like everything we've seen so far is indicative of escalation.
Let me just say this. The rhetoric is very dangerous, right? So we could go back a few months ago where you had the head of the Russian space division saying they could nuke all NATO nations within 30 minutes. Not great. I'm not very happy about that. That's something that was put out there. You have David Petraeus this week on CNN discussing if the Russians were to use a nuclear strike, that we would basically be able to use our military to take out their entire seaboard. And it's like not even
the Black Sea Fleet specifically.
Yes,
he mentioned
exactly. How horrible that would be. So the language that's being used, the things that are being portrayed to the public, you talked about the iodine thing. Well, how about that New York City emergency PSA where they're just talking about a random nuclear weapon going off in the city and what we don't know why, we don't know how, it's not important. We've never talked like this, at least not since the 80s.
You were saying the U.S. did buy these drugs?
Yeah, they're ordering it right now as part of a long-standing ongoing effort. What's this?
So I just
check this out. It's if you want to look it up, it's ASPR.
ASPR.
But if you look up
what's the website? Or what's the title? I can Google it.
HHS purchases drug for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies.
What do we got? Is that from Bloomberg?
No, it's from HHS.gov.
Whoa. Yo, HHS buying $290 million worth of Amgen drug N-plate for radiation sickness in nuclear emergency.
Wonder if that's tax money being spent.
Well,
obviously.
Yeah. Where's it coming from?
It's called theft, Ian.
So, look, here's what I want to say. Sometimes they tell you exactly what they're doing and what's coming. I mean, if they're doing this, they're not keeping it a secret from us that they think we're going to nuclear war.